Yep. And singing to the Lord a new song. He has done a marvelous thing. His right hand and his holy arm have captured us the victory. I'm going to sing to the Lord a new song. He has done a marvelous thing. His right hand and his holy arm has gotten us the victory. Sing unto the Lord a new song. He has done a marvelous thing. His right hand and his holy arm have captured us the victory. Sing unto the Lord a new song. He has done a marvelous thing. His right hand and his holy arm has guided us the victory. There's a river of life, and there's a river of life flowing down for me. It makes the lame to walk and the blind to see. It opens prison doors, sets the captives free. There's a river of life flowing down for me. Spring up a well within my soul. Spring up a well and make me whole. Spring up a well and give to me that life abundant. Oh Lord, I thank you. Oh Lord, I thank you. I really thank you. I thank you all the days of my life. Lord, I thank you. I really thank you. I thank you all the days of my life. Manny, can you open us up this morning?
Answer my question carefully. Well, I have a question, and I want to start it off just to try to get the try to get your Starbucks percolating. Who? I think they have a program called this. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Is that a program? Or Who Wants to Be Rich? Or is there some kind of a program? It's not a trick question. I'm just trying to figure out. Who wants to be a millionaire? Anybody? Ben. Why?
Bless God's kingdom, bless God's people, to provide for my family.
Okay. Bless God's kingdom. You mean it could be a good testimony to be somebody with resources. You wouldn't be I think AOC is a lady that's don't ask me how she got through the gate, but she's in our Senate or House, and she says the millionaires and billionaires are idiots and selfish and problem people. And then Elon Musk, because she was taking pot shots at him, he challenged, he said, how about if we just do a little survey, who do people trust more, the politicians with their money or the billionaires with their money? And so anybody with half a brain would trust the entrepreneurs, because the people that know how to make money quite often know the value of money, as opposed to people that are given huge sums of other people's money to spend. And this is why we're in the shape we're in. Years ago, I got onto an article about, I think it is Norway. It could be, it's one of those way up there. It's one of those, not Baltic, but northern it's not Finland. I don't think it's Finland. I think it was Norway. And what they did is their politicians honestly took a certain portion of the people's money, and then with a trust of the people that they were going to invest that, so that when retirement came, people would have something to look forward to. And so sure enough, because they did what any fifth grader could do, they invested in index funds that have a proven record of 100 years of paying. If you just invest in the top companies in the world, or the top companies in a nation, that take there's the top 500. It's called the S&P 500, I think it's called. Anyway, the point is, if you just simply put it in an index fund, which requires no man to manage it, it's just all about the rhythms of things. And so that's what they did. And now every person that retires at 60, I think they can even retire at 62. And everybody that retires at 62 is a millionaire, because they just simply faithfully invested. And if you give compounding interest an opportunity to work over a course of 20, if you can hold off for 20 years, that's when it hits a trajectory, and it begins to fantastically explode in growth. And you don't have to have, oh, wow, did they get 30%? No, they average, I think it was 12%, which is very doable. It's the average. Stock market has returned 12% in the last 100 years if you averaged it. So anyway, the point is that you can't sadly rely on our government. They are experts at spending money, not saving money. They spend all kinds of money they don't have. I feel so mixed about Ukraine, because I don't want Ukraine to fall under the vicious dictatorship of ex-commies, but they just arbitrarily, it seemed, to pass $40 billion of our money, American money, to go spend money on bombs and things for Ukraine. They haven't mapped out that this money is going to be spent this way. They purposefully muddy the waters so that whoever has control of the funds, they immediately have a lot of slush funds. And this is why somebody that goes to Congress makes $168,000 a year after being in Congress for 5 years, now has 5 or 6 mansions. And it's sad, but that's them and we are us. So we have opportunities as well, and thank God for all of the sad things going on and the unrighteous things going on. We still can be encouraged that if we'll do right, there's always a future for those that will do right. And the beautiful thing is the principles of God, the principles of reaping and sowing and reaping. They will reap they will work for whosoever will lay hold. And so the purpose of trying to teach God's people, I've said it before, we went to Davao City in 1986. The average worker worked between 10 and 12 hours a day. They would work them right up to the edge. If they got a contract of 6 months, 6 full months of work from an employer, then they had to get some benefits. In other words, they would get some medical, they get some sick pay and that kind of thing. So the trick of these unscrupulous workers, owners, they would work you right up to the day or 2 days before the 6 months, and then let you go. And there was churn. They churned. They just would, there was so many massive. When I got there, was about 20% unemployment and about 25% underemployment. So there was people that had some temporary jobs, temp jobs, but they wouldn't consider them full-time jobs. So that was the game they played, because they didn't want to be on the hook to have to pay the benefits. All right, so these people, a lot of times, I had a church, grew up to about 500 people. I'd say there was four others beside my family had a car when we left, and out of a church of 500. So 5 vehicles. I'd say very few had a business, but what started to happen is that as the principles that we were able to impress upon them, particularly tithing and learning to honor God. So then the years go by, and they were able to amass resources to build over $1 million. They purchased land, very expensive, in city of Davao. They put a beautiful, beautiful facility on top of that. So they have about $1.5 million, maybe more now, maybe possibly $2 million facility. You go along the line of the street, and there'll be many newer vehicles. Someone would start getting these little motorcycles, and then we get a little tiny, they had lots and lots of old Japanese. The Japanese would dump a lot of their old vehicles, and Koreans, and so then they started getting SUVs, and then they started getting very nice vehicles. And so this is very interesting, because we started that in 1986, so that's 36 years. The law of compounding interest, it starts immediately, but the trajectory really starts to kick around 20 years. And then the loop that goes vertical between 22 and 25, and it goes off like a rocket. And so we have seen that. It's one thing to talk about it, this could be, this might possibly happen, but when you laid the foundation, you convince people to be faithful. The most crucial issue is to be right with God, to establish the tithe principle, and then you find out that, so now there came miracles, now there came provision, now there came promotion, leapfrogging over people that were devils got pushed to the side. Now there's opportunities. This guy is working for a boss, and the boss retires and says, "Hey, I don't want to give my business to my son. He's not faithful. He's not a good, and so. But you have been faithful as a son. I will give this to you." And so we've had cases of that. We've had cases of people getting inspired, and then favor with their location for their building. And before in the Philippines, many of these little armpit, tiny little places, way up, 4th floor, way back in the corner that nobody knows, and all of a sudden, prime real estate comes open. So I could just feel like I could spend the rest of the day telling you story after story after story of how God gave us favor. And that's something, by the way, that each of us is legit. You should pray for favor, but the key, of course, is to hitch the wagon of favor to the cause. Is God, give me favor so I can be selfish, so I can become self-centered and damn my soul? That's not how God wants to do it. And so there's things that can cut in and short circuit if we don't get several pieces have to be right. Is that clear? Because people say, well, I tried once and I tried a few things and it didn't. Yeah, well, there's several crucial pieces that are in place. And just think about it. Just go step back for a little bit and try to get as unpersonal about it as possible. Do we believe? Could we just kind of have a little rah-rah session? Do we believe that God owns everything? Is it wrong for God to take what's his? Absolutely not. Is it clear that unrighteous and wicked people have lots of resources? And probably a lot of those people use unrighteous means to get their claws into it. And maybe they rode roughshod over innocent people, or they used brute force, and so on and so forth. We know that God's patience lasted for a long time with Pharaoh and his lackeys in Egypt. And so, but do we have any lesson that after the 400-year bondage of Egypt, was there anything that, oh yeah, there's another piece of unfinished business that God insisted? In fact, when they went into Egypt, he already was planning to do this. Any unfinished business that God made sure this was taken care of before they came out of Egypt. Alec?
That they got their wages paid by the Egyptians.
Okay, so he spoiled. They spoiled, and it means they plundered. They got, and so the fitting poetic justice is, you guys you built these kingdoms off the backs of these hapless. They didn't have the weapons. They didn't have the political network. They were strangers in a strange place. You exploited all of that, and then you put them in bondage and used the taskmaster's whip to drive them and to milk them, so to speak. And so God said, okay, but now you're going to pay. And so that's the interesting thing about God, is the wheels of justice may turn ever so slowly, but finally they turn. And I mean finally as in very fine, the dust. And so there's many paybacks that I've observed just in my short life, that I've observed God just seem, wow, that was interesting. Wow, that person I thought was getting away with it, and they didn't get away with anything. In fact, they got paid in spades, you might say. So that's just the point, is to realize. And so if God owns it all, he owns all the cattle on 1,000 hills. He owns all the silver and all the gold. He owns the forests and the beasts thereof. He owns the inhabitants of the earth and all that walk the planet. He owns the angels and the demons. If he owns all of the that which has life and that which is inert, or it doesn't have life as we know it. I just throw this out. Is stones and bricks and stuff, they don't breathe, but it's interesting because the stones can cry out. There's probably many things that we don't know yet about vibrations and about stuff, but that I don't want to get in deep. But the point is that all of creation is at his beck and call, and he can speak. If he wants to ignite it up, he can burn it. He will do that at some point. So it's not a big deal. My premise here is that God can take the wealth from the wicked and can give it to the righteous. He can do that. And I've had illustrations. I've had adjusters when I had my roof little damage, and the guy just out of the blue gave me an entire roof. The next guy that came which was about $5,000-$6,000 at the time. The next guy that came that was going to do the work said, hey, I'm an adjuster too. Are you telling me that your adjuster gave you the whole shebang on this? And yeah. He said, I would never do that. He said, I would have just 500. He said, well, I'm glad you're not my adjuster. I got a new roof. It's just favor, and I've had just even appliances and call up, and maybe they shouldn't have given it to you, but then they have favor and they give it to you. So I'm a believer of this. I'm a believer in God giving us favor. When you have favor, things now cooperate. You have a sense that things are smiling on you and things are working with you. I don't care who you are. If you feel like creation is against you, if you feel like the world is against you, one darn thing after another darn thing after another darn thing, it just gets old, it gets wearisome, it gets depressing. And you feel if that now the whole spirit of the thing has shifted, and people want to help you. Sometimes we've had people that don't have a dog in the fight. They don't have skin in the game, but now all of a sudden they take an interest. No, we want to help your church. We want to help you to do that. So why? There's nothing in it for you, or why would that? Just because we want to do that. Okay. And so I don't mind that. I don't mind favor. If the devil's crowd has to help us, then that's all right with me. Praise God. So just as kind of a side issue along this study, you want key words, you want key principles. You're a young person and you're seeking your way in life. If you have favor, like I told this story about getting that house in Mountain View in Prescott, Hopi Drive, 1492, I think, Hopi Drive. And he did not want to give it to us, plain and simple. And I don't blame him. He had a lot of reasons not to. I didn't have a record of a job. I didn't have a credit rating. I didn't have an answer to give him that I was going to make X amount of dollars so I would be able to make my payment. It was totally, I'm out there just walking on air and saying that I just believe that God's going to help us. But when you're an unbelieving landlord and you hear that the guy's going to pay his rent by faith, that doesn't necessarily, even myself, I've had some Christians try to pull some stuff, and it's like, nope. We want a little more tangible. And so when he told me that Michelle had witnessed to him with some passion and said, oh, sir, da-da-da-da-da. And when he told me that when your wife said she had prayed for that house, I heard a voice that said inside of me, you better rent that house to them or you're going to hell. I wasn't soliciting that, but I surely enjoyed that. That made my lunch. I had a delicious lunch, and it's like, but I just share those kind of testimonies because wait a second. I would have never known that God did that. I would have never known that God did that on my behalf. It greatly encouraged me when I found it out. But I know this. There are many things that God is doing on behalf of his people. You have no idea. God's a gentleman. Actually, the truth is, God is modest. He's not sounding the trumpets all the time. Look what the great Oz, the great, I have done. And you know what? He actually loves it. If you want to be have some insight, he loves it. He loves it when you figure out, my God, that didn't just happen. Lord, I sense you. I sense you were in this, and I can start to sense the smile of heaven start to break in, the glint maybe in the eyes of the Lord as he one of the things that hurts him is that my people perish for their lack of knowledge, because they did not study my word. They did not learn my ways. So, okay. So we have, what's the baseline if we're going to be somebody that has a right to expect God's blessing? What's the baseline to begin our financial relationship with God? Kim? And when you say covenant of tithing, define a couple terms. What is a tithe? Tenth of your income, of your increase of your income, right? Your increase. So your increase. All right. And then what was the other part that you said? I kind of like to expand a little bit, because there's a difference between a black and white contract. A covenant has a sacred dimension to it. A covenant enters into the realm of death. Somebody had to die to ratify. In fact, the word means to cut. Contract, all too ready, people are ready to ink something and it means, technically it means that you're giving your word. You could be prosecuted if you don't keep your word. So it's a legal binding. A covenant is more of a sacred binding. The covenant is that this is between two parties that are entering in, and there's a heart investment. It's not just simply this is mutual business. This is just, I'm taking you for my business partner. There is a relational bond that reaches into the realm of the sacred, because blood is shed. And this is around this. This means that it's not light. It's being entered into with a sense of sobriety and a sense of reverence, and that this is costing. This isn't just convenience. This cost. And so I think really an understanding, or proper understanding of the covenantal nature would probably change people from being so glib, so haphazard, iffy, in and out, up and down, and so that would be the beginning point. Pastor Mitchell gave it to us a long time ago, and whenever we started running into people, and we had times in our fellowship where we had pastors. We always had an understanding that if you're going to be sent out, the way that our financial network, or you could say, or relationship work, is the mother church is investing in you. So going to help you building equipment, support, prayer, impact teams, help you in conference, send you revivals. And so you're going to, of all the tithes and offerings that come in, you're to have the 10th is going to be sent back to your mother church. And this is the principle that of our financial layout as we go on. And so then obviously the objective is that they become self-supporting. They plant churches. As they do that, then they get daughter churches to tithe back, and the system with the blessing of God continues to blow and grow and be blessed. So then we had guys that had a better idea. They thought they were Coca-Cola. They had a better idea. Or Ford has a better idea. And so then they say, well, we're done with that. We don't want to tithe. And besides, tithing to a church is not biblical. And so that is really a dodge, because it's interesting. The ones that did that, they weren't stopping their churches from tithing. They were just wanting to stop. They thought they had some big amounts or something, and they wanted to stop tithing to Pastor Mitchell or Prescott, but they wanted to keep in place the system of daughter church tithing. You get that? In other words, they want to break away thank you for everything you've done and all the blessings and headship and blah, blah, blah. Now it's time to kick you, and we'll have our own system over here. Well, that was a fundamental error because the tithe is not a legality. The tithe is the currency of relationship. Somewhere in your heart, note that. The tithe is the currency of relationship. People that are in right relationship, they don't have a big problem. If a man and a woman get married and they're truly in love, they're truly in covenant with one another, they don't have, they're always splitting hairs, they're always in their house, they always divide. Okay, Michelle, this is mine. Don't you touch this? And that's silly. That's not a relationship. That's more like it could be a business partnership. It could be major psychological dementia. But there's a lot of issues. Tithe is the currency of relationship. And so when you're applying that to God, if I tithe to God, it's saying to God, what is it saying to God? I'm tithing to God, because it's good to review it. What is it saying when I tithe to God? What is it saying? Okay? Trust what? Okay? So you're saying you're by a visible demonstration. Faith without works is dead. So faith with works is alive. You're giving a demonstration that you trust God. You trust God as what? As your what? Am I? Provider. And so if that is absolutely settled in your heart, and that's something that you have, then in fact you're going to see God come through time and time again. If you do believe that God is your provider and you tithe, then you're not going to sweat it. You may have some trials a bit, but you still will live to tell stories about God providing, because that's what God does. He said, prove me, and I'll open the windows of heaven. So that's what it is. It's the tithe is your placing yourself under God's provision. This was the revelation that God, when he gave it to through Melchizedek, God's priest. This was established with the first man of faith, Abraham. This starts right from the beginning. It predates the law. Someone says, well, it's a law, but it predates the law. And we have the law first mentioned. Abraham by faith paid tithes, and so did Abel, by the way. And so then we have Jacob. When he has the revelation that God is with him, God is his provider, he makes a clear declaration: all that God gives me, food, clothing, increase, I will give the 10th to God. And he adds also, I'm not going to forget God's house, the place, Bethel, and the portion, the tithe. Later on, Moses, we call it, codifies it, because it came to the first two, Abraham and Jacob, by dint of a revelation. It burst on as a revelation. That's still the best way to tithe. I can talk to you, you should tithe. I could give you 100 reasons, but it's far better that you have your own personal experience that, wow, God is my provider. Wow, God has intervened in my life. God has been faithful to me. He is a faithful God. There's no question in my mind that this is a right and a righteous thing to do. I'm going to be a tither of all that God gives me. That's signed, sealed, delivered. No more questions, no more open for debate. Doesn't matter. First tenth is God's. That's the way it's going to be. me and my house the rest of our lives. Hopefully that's everybody's experience. But just because when you got 3 million people by Moses' time, because tithing is necessary and tithing is to your benefit, the merciful God, he doesn't give us grievous commandments. He codified it or put it as a law because he wants everybody to know this law, and not everybody's going to have angels popping up and opening in heaven. So he gave it as a general law, but it's a better experience for you and I to have your own revelation of that. I hope that's clear. All right, so let's look at Second Chronicles 31, 4 and 5. You study the history of revival, and what you'll find is that whenever Israel got off track, this tithing, it got dumped by the wayside. People began to ignore, forget, steal, whatever you want to say, and as a consequence, they became more vulnerable to their enemies, whether it was physical armies, whether it was pests of bugs, and whether it was drought. In other words, something seems to be able to coincide when the people forgot to tithe, or shall I say disobeyed tithing, then a whole host of other problems. And so that all comes up to the crescendo in Malachi, and he said, you're cursed with a curse. When you stop the tithing, there's pests, there are armies, there's weather goes berserk. And so what you'll always find in Israel's time of restoration back with God, you'll find that tithing, once again, is mentioned. Second Chronicles 31, 4 and 5. Could I get somebody, Kevin? Then I need Second Chronicles 31, 9 and 10. Who'd get that for me? Nate. Then I need Nehemiah 13, 10 through 12. Nehemiah Carl. And keep your finger there, Carl, because I'm going to ask you to read verse 14 as well. Acts 10, 1 through 4. Who's going to help me there? Ken. All right, let's step through this because I want to introduce another principle. So I'm just making a point. If you stop tithing and then you start to reap the whirlwind, you put your money with bag and holes in it, can't get ahead, it seems you get beat down, then the solution is to say, God, I'm sorry, God, I've stolen from you, I ripped you off of the tithe, God forgive me, and I'm convinced that I did wrong, and God, I believe what Pastor said, that the tithe is the currency of relationship, and God, you're such a good God, you give me everything, every good gift comes from you to enjoy, and I want to get back on track today. I want to, Lord, if you give me a dime, I'm going to give you a penny of it. You give me $1, I'm going to give you 10 cents. You give me $100,000, I'm going to give you 10%, and start it and do it, and then get back in that flow and get back in that cycle. Okay, let's go and 2 Chronicles 31, 4 and 5.
Moreover, he commanded the people who dwelt in Jerusalem to contribute support for the priests and the Levites, that they might devote themselves to the law of the Lord. As soon as the commandment was circulated, the children of Israel brought in abundance the first fruits of grain and wine, oil and honey, and of all the produce of Israel and Judah, all the produce of the field, and they brought in abundantly the tithe of everything.
Okay, so the commandment, you got a good king, you have evil kings, evil rulers, they're not sticklers for this, it doesn't matter, who cares, do as you're led, do what you feel, you have to. No, and Hezekiah said, no, we're going back to the ways of God. You know what, God's ways, the fathers were given things by revelation from God. And we're going to call the wells that our father Abraham dug by the same names. They're in the same, the water is in the same places that God put it. And so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. we're going to go back. And they dug out those wells. They called them by the names of their father. I don't have to have fancy new fangled ideas all the time. Discipleship is what God calls what we're supposed to do. Tithing is what God calls us what to do. And so as Hezekiah commanded us, and so the people, obviously there's factors there. The people are ready. They're ready to hear instruction. That's a blessed time when people will stop fighting. Stop it. Stop talking back. Stop arguing. And sir, pastor, brother, leader, is there a word from the Lord for us? Yeah, but are you going to do it? No, please, please, please. Give us the word of the Lord. Could you tell us? Remember, not everybody could read. Not everybody had access. You know what? And so to get a righteous leader and preacher and declares the word of God, that they could get it, they understood it. All right, let's do it. And they that spirit of camaraderie, that spirit of obedience, and the minute that they got the word, as soon as the commandment came abroad, make a point. Don't delay. People delay. Well, I think I'll think about it. I know it's right. I know what you said is right. That sermon's right. That principle is right. But I'm just gonna think about it. That's the oldest trick in the book. You're gonna think about it, and by the time you're out the back door, you're already started to lose the conviction of it. And so a key, if you're going to really advance in the things of God, advance in discipleship, you answer an altar call because you got convicted, then rise up and start to do it. You got some junk at your house that God convicted you to get rid of it, right from the altar. Don't go out shopping. Don't go this place. Go to your house, get it, throw it away. You got somebody that you got to get right with. Don't go on a vacation and then decide I'll get back to you in 3 weeks when I get back and have more time. Go to them today before you bring. And if you do those things and keep things tight with the short in your short, as we have that saying, keep your stuff short with God. You will grow, and you will get. Well, I don't seem to grow. Well, maybe it's because you delay. Maybe because you're a procrastinator. There's a lot. Don't. Why should we assume that it's God's fault? I always assume it's my fault. I always assume the problem's not on God's side. He's the good God. He did everything he's supposed to. Okay, so then Hezekiah was encouraged. Did I give you 2 Chronicles 31, 9 and 10? So when obedience came, as is quite often the case, there's heaps. So the people were in agricultural time, and so they bring of their crops, and they said, okay, we're not going to play a game and chintz out and play a little game. So they got their tenth, and they brought them in. So okay, over here, this is where we're going to put the wheat. Over here is going to put the corn. And so forth. And then Hezekiah comes in. He says, what is all this? He said, man, ever since the people had a heart to obey God, all of this has been greatly multiplying. And this is greatly encouraging to the priests that have to serve. I hate to be like self-serving, but the priests, like, what if the people don't give? So then what are the priests going to do? So then they got to go have a side hustle. That wasn't God's plan. It's not the way it's supposed to be. So the priests are greatly encouraged because they say, wow, the people care. They care about us getting taken care of, so we don't have to go off and work 3 jobs. All right, but the comment is, for the Lord has blessed his people. When the obedience was manifest, the Lord has blessed his people. We're talking about multiplying and accelerating, okay? And so if you will see this on a a corporate, as in the overall church, and in a personal. If you will return to obedience and practice repentance in any area that God might deal with you about, then it's not. The beautiful thing is, I don't believe it takes God 20 years to find you, to put a blessing on you. Nehemiah, just to cover this, was another great revival in Israel's history. Nehemiah 13, 10 through 12. So he's picking up. He says, what's going on? The priests aren't at their posts. The house of God's lacking. Things are running down. It just seems like there's a depression here. What's going on? And he questions, and the Levites said, well, we can't eat. We've had too many air sandwiches, and so it would be nice if the people honored God. So then they got amongst themselves, and they got a little encouragement from the leaders. Said, listen, you're going to do it or not? You're going to honor God's word? You're going to do what God told us to do? Or are you going to be a bunch of skippers? You're going to skip out on God? And so he punched it through. You know about Nehemiah. He was pretty intense person. And he looked him in the eye, and he said, this is what you need to do. And so they did it. And just a side point, obedience, many times, just like disobedience, is infectious. And when you lack morale, if you have a bad spirit, you have you transmit. Somebody that has a foul spirit, somebody that has a disobedient, lustful, dirty rebel, they project, and it's like infectious. People that have obedience, a good spirit, kind spirit, helpful spirit, that also. And so I hope you would love to be in the side that pleases God. So then Nehemiah, he contended for that, and he wants God's blessing, like any good leader. You want the blessing of God. I want you to prosper. I want you not to suffer and go stretched, just feeling like you're on the racks of torment. And having said that, because America is an interesting place, if you use your charge card to charge up all your toys and all your games and little motorbikes and guns and your little accumulated stuff, and then you're complaining, say, well, I don't have any money for these other things. Yeah, but you're not being real. You're not being real. America has a surplus, but if you'll be honoring God's purposes, you'll have more than enough for your need. Did I give Acts chapter 10, verse 1 through 4? Did I give that? Ken. So, I want to get this Nehemiah 13, 10 through 12. Did I give that? Did you already read that? Okay, and then verse 14, did you read that too?
Remember me, O God, concerning this, wipe not out my good deeds that I have done for the house of my God, for the loss.
Yeah, in verse 12, it says, then brought all Judah the tithe of all the corn and the new wine and the oil under the treasuries. Verse 14, this is the third time that Nehemiah prays this way. Remember me, O my God, concerning this, and wipe not out my good deeds that I have done for the house of my God and for the offices thereof. So what he's saying is that because he has faithfully served God, he sought to encourage the people of God to serve God, and then out of that he's also has a liberty or a boldness to say, and oh, by the way, could you remember me? God, and he said, in previous, he said, you know what, Lord, of my own cost, there were opportunities I could have. I had some advantage as the leader. I could have taken some stuff that was legitimate, but I chose out of my own resources to bless the people of God, to bless the work of God. But nobody knows that, God, but you know that. And I'm asking you, God, would you remember me for good? A good prayer is if you have secret works, which all of us should have some secret service to God. Don't let all your works have a trumpet. Hey, Olson is giving, he's giving a flower to the altar. Don't hide some of that. Hide it. You gave a Pentecostal handshake to somebody. There goes Olson again. He's giving. Isn't he a great swell person? No, I prefer you wouldn't do that, and I prefer myself don't do that. And so if you keep down low on that, God sees that. But in your private prayer time, you can say, God, you know, thou knowest, Lord, and would you remember me? And that's a legitimate prayer. So Acts chapter 10, we're just about out of time. And did I give Acts chapter 10 to anybody? Go ahead, read it.
There was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of what was called the Italian regiment, a devout man and one who feared God with all his household. He gave alms generously to the people and prayed to God always. About the 9th hour of the day, he saw clearly in a vision an angel of God coming in and saying to him, Cornelius. And when he observed him, he was afraid and said, What is it, Lord? So he said to him, Your prayers and your alms have come up for a memorial before God.
Okay, and so what we have is a Gentile, and he has linked himself. He's in the nation of Israel. He's observed the Jewish people. He's inquired. He's been very interested. We could say fascinated with the Jewish religion, which is monotheism, worshipers of one God. And so he started to practice a number of their ways. One being that he prayed. We find in this text he also practiced fasting, and then he also practiced almsgiving, which is giving to people that have need and seeking out to express generosity to people that have lesser fortunate than you. And so while he's doing that, the angel breaks in and calls out and says, your prayers and your alms are come up for a memorial before God. So, point to make. If a Gentile that doesn't have a covenant relationship yet, if he is able to get this kind of attention and the spotlight can come on him, and God would dispatch an angel to come and talk to him, to enlighten him, to show him more of the truth, how much more are you and I that are blood washed, part of the family? Is it God's will that you would have God's recognition and God's blessing and God's encouragement upon your life? How much more? And see, again, that's faith. It's like some people is like the elder brother. The elder brother's faithful to the farm. I go to work all the time. I go to church all the time. I do my work all the time. I pay my tithes all the time. And it's like, but then when there's a blessing that goes off to somebody else, of course, nobody here would ever have a jealousy issue. Anyway, so when he sees somebody else get blessed, boy, does that typhoon, bam, that explosion comes out. You never gave me a kid, a scrawny little goat, to have a little barbecue party, but this your son who wasted your living with harlots and riotous living. In other words, he was drinking and whoring around, immorality. And so, and that's interesting too, because he knew it in his heart. Did it say, by the way, does anybody really know what that the prodigal son had a whore? Does anybody know that? You might want to read the Bible, because it says, it doesn't say he went to the harlots. Well, who knows? People have some pretty dark imaginations. You ever been accused of something you didn't do? Then why don't you hold back? Hi-ho, silver. In the book of Luke, he wasted your living with riotous living and harlots. You don't know that. Probably you did, but just interesting that you know that you know. It just bothers me when people are like that. And so, anyway, the point is, even if he did, he came back and repented, and God was merciful, and God was gracious, got him the fatted calf. He didn't get him the scrawny alley cat. The fatted calf. That means like there's some meat on those ribs. And then he got him the best robe, and then he got him the ring, and then he got him shoes. In other words, he decked him out, man. He restored him. What's the issue? We're going to win our case in this present little sliver of time. I was better than you were, and I'm better than you are, Johnny. Or are we going to have another soul to spend eternity with that has the capacity to love, that has the capacity to have the image of God, that has the capacity, could be your best friend, could be somebody that teaches you something in eternity that might be the delight of your delights. Who knows? Maybe that guy would have taught his older brother how to putt on the 18th green. Who knows? You don't know. But just, and so the point is that there's so many people that you didn't give me nothing, you didn't do for me, and then I get convicted. I've spent a lot of time, and I say, God, is it me? And a lot of times I kind of feel like God said, yes, it is you. You can pretend you're all humble with God. Lord, is it I? And God says, been waiting for you to ask me that. I mean, God's kind. He doesn't crush us. But you know what? How many times have I been, whining about, I did and I was faithful, and how come so-and-so gets to do that? And how come that person gets away with that? And then Lord says, come on, take a chill pill. And why don't we just concentrate on the good stuff? Have I not done good things for you? And if you start to hem and haw and get all, bent out of shape, you need to go back. You need to go back and reflect on all the good things that God's done. But if God would send an angel to an unbeliever, guess what? He did that because he's watching that unbeliever, remembering that unbeliever. God wanted that unbeliever to know, I'm aware of your giving, I'm aware of your generosity, and I've come to add increase and help to increase your life. Granted so, O Lord Jesus. Can everybody say amen?